So Wolcen has had a rocky development cycle to say the least, with a release date for early access of March 24th, 2016 on Steam. It's been in development for quite some time. It spent a significant amount of time in alpha before the developers finally decided to completely redo the game, only recently reaching its current beta status. But now Content Patch 1 has gone live, and it's added Act 1 of the story, giving us a real chance to see what the developers are up to and what kind of progress they're currently making in the game. With that being said, I've been able to spend quite a bit of time with Wilson over the past week or so, getting to know the current content patch, and I have some thoughts on it, some optimism, and some things that I think they really need to work on if they're going to be able to make this game the kind of hit that they would like it to be. So I want to talk about that, what I think is going well, where I think there's room for optimism, and where I think there's still a lot of room for improvement and where the devs really need to be focusing their energy if they want this game to truly be a hit when it comes out, hopefully in late 2019, but probably more like sometime in 2020. All right, let's start with the optimism. The first and most obvious thing in this game is the art and the graphics are just incredible. It's a tier above anything else that's currently out or even in development as far as what we've seen. Who knows what Diablo 4 looks like? But from what we actually know, this game is just absolutely gorgeous. There's nothing like it. And it continues to look better and better every time we look at it. So, Content Patch 1 released this Act 1, which includes a bunch of cutscenes. Those cutscenes are incredible. This looks like a AAA game. It's a small indie developer putting out AAA level quality cutscenes, AAA quality artwork, graphics. I mean, even the background of this game just looks unbelievably amazing. So we have a lot to be excited about when it comes to what this game is going to look like when it's completely finished as far as eye candy goes. And that's something that I really enjoy. I really like games that look good, and this game is unquestionably the best looking game right now in the genre. But on top of that, or along with that, the music is really good. And it should be. They've been touting how they've been working with an orchestra to actually make the music, and it seems to have worked out well. The music that they put in this game is so far excellent, and I can't imagine that it's going to be any less so when we get more music in the future. Another area where we've really gotten to learn a lot about where the developers are going is the story. So we didn't have a story until now. Alpha had some story, but they scrapped that. The initial beta release didn't have any story whatsoever. So getting Act 1 now really gives us an insight on where the developers are trying to go. And I've got to say, it looks good, man. I mean, it looks really good. The story is very intriguing, and I want to know more. I really like the environment. I like the setting of this game. And there were some things that really surprised me too. Things I didn't quite expect to be as good as they were. For example, the dialogue in the story right now is really good. And remember, this is a French developer. A lot of times, developers who don't have English as their first language struggle with dialogue, at least initially, when they localize. But I think maybe where it's worked out well for Wolcen, the Wolcen devs in particular, is that they're going English first, and they seem to have gotten really good actors and actresses to do the actual dialogue. The writing is excellent. It's funny at times. The humor is really good. It doesn't come off as cheesy. Everything about it has been a net positive for the actual storytelling. So I'm really glad to see that. Another thing that's been really good to see is the difficulty and the mechanics that are in the game. We've kind of saw a lot of that from the initial beta release, but now we've gotten some actual boss fights in the story, and they're pretty challenging, especially the last boss of Act 1. No spoilers, but let's just say it's a challenging fight. For some classes, more so than others, there's some balancing issues, but there's no doubt that the developers want us as players to benefit from being skilled in learning fights, not just having really good gear or a really good build, but our actual ability to play the game is going to be rewarded. And I like that. I prefer that. I certainly want to be able to feel more powerful with gear and with my build, but I also want to be rewarded for doing the fight properly and avoiding stuff that should hurt me. And at least the early impressions are that the Wolcen devs want that to be what this game is at least partially about, and I'm happy to see it. Character customization has also been improved. So we all know about, or at least if we were following the announcements that have been made about this patch, that the passive skill tree was going to be revamped, and it has been. It's certainly much meatier. There's certainly a lot more options in there, and there are now more points to take. I think they just about doubled the amount of points we get. But that wasn't all that they added. They also added more active modifiers to the skills, and some of them are really interesting. They're really enticing, and being able to put on more than we could before is really cool. Also, having minor and major modifiers, I think, worked out well. I was a little unsure about it when they first announced that they were going to do that, but I think it actually has worked out pretty well. Obviously, balancing still needs to be done with all of these systems, but what we see here, I think, is a game that went from having a lot of concern as far as character customization and will it really live up to the depth that a lot of players wanted, to saying, yeah, okay, I see where you're going with this. I see what you want to do. You fixed the passive skill tree problem. The active modifiers seem like a much more interesting version of the runes from Diablo, in that you can have multiple runes and you have to make decisions based on how many points you have. There's a lot more customization than just one single rune that you'd pick for a Diablo skill. Those two systems coming together give us a lot of opportunities for our customization. And on top of that, the uniques also seem to offer quite a bit of customization. So there's reason to be hopeful that they're going to have a game here that is going to have a lot of depth as far as how we build our characters and how many options we have. And I'm really hopeful for that now, which, hey, that's a big step. That's a really big step from one patch to another. The last thing I want to talk about on the optimism side is an interesting one that's not directly involved with the game, but is really important to me, especially coming from where I spent a lot of time in the last epoch lately, where the community there, the community engagement there from the developers is incredible. It's unlike anything I've ever seen, and Wolcen in the past has really been lacking there. Their community engagement has been, and sometimes honestly, pretty awful. And it's gotten better over time, but I think they took a really big step forward between the beta launch and this last patch in how much information they were providing to the players, going through and showing us previews of what they're working on, keeping us abreast when there was changes to the release date. And although certainly we don't like it when updates get pushed back, it's not fun for us. We're excited for something, anticipating, and then it gets pushed back, and it's like, oh, that sucks. But rather that than have it unfinished. In the past, it might have been the case that we wouldn't even really know what was going on as far as that. Now, we're pretty well informed, I'd say, by the developers. One minor issue I will point out is they actually had a release date 2 days after when they actually released it. So the release date they had scheduled, or the last release date they scheduled was 26th. They released on the 24th. For most people, that's good. For a streamer, that's not very good because you're planning on streaming on that day and being there like the first minute it launches, and that all kind of gets thrown out the window when they do that. But that's a minor thing. Overall, it's been a lot better, particularly with the community manager. I forget her name, unfortunately, but the community manager has really gotten a lot better, and I really appreciate it personally. It means a lot to me when developers keep their community engaged. Could be a little bit better though. In particular, I go on Discord a lot. I check what's going on. Sometimes the engagement with the developers, with people who are asking questions, it's a little. I don't even know how to put it. They're not always really good at responding with information that's useful, and almost sometimes feel a little standoffish. But it's at this point that's a relatively minor complaint, given that they're actually keeping us up to date with all the stuff that's really, really important. Okay, so that's the optimism for me. But let's talk about some of the things that could derail this train as it's getting closer and closer towards something that we can really judge as either going to be a good game or not meeting the standard that we would like to see. First off, let's talk about multiplayer stability. This is a really big one for me. So I've been streaming this game for about the last week after the patch came out. And when I stream, I almost always play multiplayer. That's just something I prefer. I'll play solo from time to time, but multiplayer is the thing I like. And one of the things I've really liked about Wolcen is that it has the multiplayer. Last Epoch, for example, doesn't have theirs yet. Wolcen does. Unfortunately, it is not stable, at least not the way that we've been playing it. So the last stream that I actually did, we were kicked out of the game more times than we were able to keep track of. Someone would crash, and we basically had to restart from the beginning because once somebody crashed, they couldn't rejoin our party. It would say that they're in our party, but they would not recognize themselves on their side as being in our party. They couldn't actually come into the party, and they couldn't be kicked from the party. We get an error every time. That forced us all to go back to the main menu, recreate the party. There were also times when the entire party would literally crash. All of our games crashed. We'd start at the desktop again, start over. Now, this is an issue for sure. It's a pretty big issue, but it's exacerbated by the fact that there's a huge load time just to get into the game. Now, I think that is because the developers decided they wanted to front load the load times, because when you actually get in the game, there's almost no load time, which is really cool. And that would be fine for a game that is stable. A game that's stable where you just log in or load in that one time and you're good and you play for several hours and you don't have to worry about it again. Totally good with that. But it's not where we're at. And so every time we'd be kicked back out, we'd have a 5-minute load time. And so we spent, I don't know how much time on the stream just loading into the game. And so this is a big issue for people who want to play multiplayer. It's a big issue for people who are streaming, people who are watching streams because they have to watch the load times. It's a really important part of the game to make sure your multiplayer is stable. And right now, from my experience, Wolcen's is not. Now, there is a caveat to that. The caveat is the build I was using. The build I was playing for this content patch was an ailment build, and it was particularly difficult, I would guess, for the server because it was a fire-based ailment dot build that also used a unique called Genesis that when shadow procced on it would cause explosions, and those explosions would proc off of each other, so it'd be explosion after explosion after explosion. And there was actually a point where we believe it was the build that I was playing lagged the server so hard that it took it almost 7 minutes to recover from the lag, where we couldn't even see like damage numbers. Enemies couldn't find us. The other players in our party were kind of like teleporting around the screen. It was pretty bad.
Dude, when that skill goes off, it's so nice, but...
It's really cool. It's just a meme build now because the server hates it.
There you go.
And then you get the really big explosions every once in a while if you do enough of them. And it's just, like, it's so satisfying.
Again. Catching up. We're about to die. Run away to the server catches up. Oh my god. Oh, fire.
So that might be a big part of the problem with stability. And if so, then it seems like that might be more easily fixed than if it's a more universal problem. But unfortunately, I've only played the one build, so I don't really know if this is a problem that is because of the build or if it's a more general issue. Either way, fixing that is going to go a long way towards really stabilizing the game and moving it forward closer to being ready for release. That's related to the stability problem is bugs. Now it's in beta. You expect there to be bugs. What you don't expect are bugs to persist for literally months. Bugs that were pointed out at beta's launch that are significant bugs I'm in particular talking about bank items disappearing. This is a problem that Wolcen has had since launch of beta, and there's been multiple patches that have come out that have said we've fixed it. It's not a problem anymore. But if you go onto Wolcen's Discord right now, what you will see are people saying that their items are disappearing from their bank. So that problem is clearly not resolved. And they need to be better at resolving these bugs more quickly, especially large game-breaking style bugs. Because when you start losing your legendaries and your uniques in your bank and your money, that's a massive issue. It's going to make most players just stop playing the game. Like after a while, it's like I can't keep any of my gear. I can't progress. Why would I keep playing this? So that's a huge issue, and the fact that it hasn't been resolved yet. Now, maybe there's just one particular issue that has an especially problematic technical issue, and it's not indicative of how quickly the developers can go with other bugs. But regardless, it's a big issue that's not currently addressed, and it doesn't seem like they're doing a very good job of telling us what's going on, except for they keep putting out patches saying, hey, it's fixed, but it's actually not. So that needs to be addressed. All right, I have two more things that I want to talk about. First one is combat. Combat is an especially hopeful area for me because there are so many aspects of combat as it is now that are fun and interesting. But there are a couple of things that are currently holding it back, particularly animation canceling and combat sluggishness, which are very much related. So animation canceling is your character starts doing something, and let's say an enemy starts an attack on you, something that's telegraphed, and you want to avoid it. If animation canceling is implemented in the game, then you will just stop doing whatever that attack was or that ability was, and you will move if that's what you want it to do, if that's what you tell your character to do, and you'll avoid the attack. You won't get off either. You won't get off the ability that you were trying to get off, or you'll just get it off and then quickly move out of the way as soon as you can. But how Wolcen's currently got it is you'll do an ability, you can't cancel the ability, and once the ability's gone off, there is an animation that continues after the ability's already gone off for a ridiculously long amount of time for an ARPG, to where you're just standing there clicking away, trying to move, and you can't. There's also an issue that's related to that with potions, where you have to stop to drink a potion. That one's not as big of a deal, I don't think, because the potion animation is really quick. But this stuff is all related in that it slows down gameplay, and it makes it more difficult to avoid attacks, and it kind of actually takes away from skill instead of adding to skill, in my opinion. So these are things that need to be addressed. Fortunately, Riker's video, which came out, I think, yesterday on this game, he claims that the developers are aware of this and are planning on adding animation canceling. So hopefully this will be resolved and I won't have to worry about it anymore. That'll be great. Because like I said, the actual combat of this game in general, I think is really hopeful. There's a lot of reason for positivity and optimism. And this is my biggest gripe there. Okay, last thing I want to talk about. We mentioned the passive skill tree nodes as a positive or as a reason for optimism, but there's also some concern there. So, if you played Alpha, you probably know that the skill tree nodes in Alpha, especially the big ones, had some really interesting mechanics that could really change gameplay. I didn't play much Alpha, but there are plenty of people I've talked to who said, yeah, there's some really interesting, cool stuff there. And currently, that's just not the case. Now, the first iteration of beta, it was a small skill tree. Understandable that there wasn't a whole lot of cool stuff, but now they've said, all right, we're going to revamp all that stuff, and we're going to make it way better, give you way more choices. Okay, so we got the revamped one. There's a lot more choices, but they're not all that interesting. They're still not all that interesting. There's something about that passive skill tree that's still pretty damn boring, and now is time to start to be a little concerned. The first iteration, all right, you didn't get it, you missed the mark, but you recognized it, and you're revamping. Or now we've revamped, and we still seem to be missing the mark. The passive skill nodes just aren't that interesting still. Are they capable of making interesting passive skill tree nodes? I think they are. I do. And hopefully this time they'll actually recognize that portion of it, because there was a lot they had to do with the skill tree. Basically, look at every node and say, is this good, is this bad? And then add a whole bunch of other nodes to it. They're also doing this while considering what they're going to do with the third ring of the node. So I think they can, but there's still reason to worry because they haven't yet. And it has been 2 iterations after they abandoned the alpha for this beta. But overall, I think if we consider everything I've talked about here, if you agree with those things, there's more optimism than there is pessimism. Like, it feels like this was a step forward. This content patch gave us some serious reason to think, hey, maybe they can pull this off. Maybe they can make a truly great ARPG, something we haven't seen since like Path of Exile, Grim Dawn, whichever one of those came out after. Those are probably the last 2 would consider great ARPGs that have released. It'd be great to have another one. Maybe Wolcen can be it. We have some good things that happened here. If they can get the other stuff out of the way, if they can figure that stuff out, and if they can continue to move forward with the content that they're planning, and that stuff comes out and looks good, we might be on our way. We might be on our way. Here's the hoping. Thank you so much, everyone, for checking out the video. If you enjoyed it, please give me a like. If you want to see more content like this, please drop me a subscribe. Also, I stream on Twitch 6 days a week. I play ARPGs and MMOs. Wolcen's one of them. Last Epoch is one of them. So if you're into that genre, come check us out. The community's awesome there. Love hanging out with everyone. Come chat. I'd love to see you join our community there. Have a great one and enjoy your time at Wolcen.